Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday morning video service. The weather's been beautiful. Just can't complain about what's going on outside, can we? Um, July is almost over. Can you believe that? That's kind of scary. Next week is going to be our Communion Sunday, so we'll be serving a meal after church if we can decide what we're going to make. Our ladies group is meeting on Thursdays at 11 here on Thursdays at the Father's house and at 6:30 on Thursdays on Zoom. If you want to be a part of that, we'd love to have you join us. Today is our regular tithes and offerings, so you can go to thefathershouse.org, click on the giving button, set it up as a one-time gift or a recurring gift. You can mail a check to the Father's House at 133 Barnall Road, San Jose, California, 95119. Or you can come to church on Sunday and give in our tithe boxes. So we'd love to see you. That's really all I have to cover today. So we'll turn the time over to Pastor Carl.
Well, good morning, Father's House. How are you today? I bet everything's going well this beautiful summer day. Again, this summer has been absolutely gorgeous. Actually, I actually got more time to talk. Penny and I were just talking because she was so short on her announcements, like she had absolutely nothing to say. And she said, "Well, now you can talk longer if you want to." So it's like, oh, brother, here we go. It's going to be one of those days. Well, anyway, maybe not. How are you all today? Everybody doing okay? I hope you are. I know I'm doing well. Enjoying life, enjoying the summer and just the season. I've got some tomatoes getting ready to go off. They're about the size of softballs. Those ones that I got from Moses, the pineapple tomatoes, and I think I'll have one either later on today or by tomorrow. I'll have one or two. So here comes all tomato season for us. Salsa and tomato sauce and whatever else we're going to do with them, salads, whatever. Man, I'm just looking forward to it, and I'm sure that you guys are too. As the harvest is almost right upon us, which is amazing at how fast the seasons go by and the years go by as well. But anyway, other than that, things are going well, and life is good. So we might as well just get to it and talk a little bit about what we've been talking about in the life of Joshua. If you want, you can go back and look at past videos that I've done on this series. As far as God making him a leader, and kind of what our premise has been. Basically, is what is it that God did or had to do in Joshua by way of Moses and himself to get him prepared to fill Moses's shoes and move into the promised land. So we've talked about that for the last 5 or 6 weeks. And then last week we actually began to move into Moses had died and Joshua after and all the things that he had learned Joshua during that period when he was mentored by Moses, and how he steps into now taking on the leadership of the nation of Israel as they go into the promised land, which Moses was forbidden to enter into. So last week we talked about Joshua having really probably his first appearance with God, where God was speaking directly to him. And he said in that exchange, he said 3 times to him, "Be strong and courageous. Do not fear and do not be dismayed." So you can go back and look at the videos from last week, either the YouTube video, but I can always expand on this video on Sunday morning and add a lot more to it. So you can find those videos on our Facebook pages. We're live streaming the service. And so I've got a lot more to say on those. As a matter of fact, I actually use this tape that I'm doing now as the basis for what I'll do on Sunday. In other words, I kind of lay out what it is I want to talk about on these videos, and I share them with you. I go back and watch these the next day, and then what I do is I begin to self-edit. I edit what I want to change and other things that I want to add, and it helps me to kind of think through the process. So, in other words, I kind of deliver this same message twice, and I find for the most part, it's always better the second time. But this last week we talked about Joshua being strong and courageous, not being dismayed or afraid, and that really it was kind of in 3 ways. Be strong and of good courage, because God said, "Because I am with you." Be strong and of good courage to carry out all that's written in the law, that you and this people might prosper. We talked about that God wants his people to prosper. Prosperity for God looks different than prosperity than what we think prosperity looks like, but he's always given to wanting us to prosper. We talked about that. And the third thing was, as they were facing their what you call their eschatological future, or towards their future, he said, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed, right? As he's looking at this promised land that God's going to give them. So there was this idea of be strong and courageous because God is with you, same way as with Moses. The second thing, be strong and courageous to carry out the law. And the third thing is be strong and courageous as far as what your future holds, because I can only have good for you in your future. And I promise certain things to you. So that's what we talked about. So let's fast forward now. We're going to go forward about 4 chapters in the book of Joshua forward to kind of talk about some incidences in Joshua's life. Because remember, this isn't a story about Israel. This is a story about we're picking out the narrative of what God's doing in Joshua, how he's fashioning, how he's teaching him, how he's training him, and how those things apply to our life. Mario was talking with me the other day because he did one of the series. He says last week he said, I went back before I did the teaching that he did. He taught one of them, and he said, and I listened to what you had said on the book of Joshua or through Joshua's life, and he said I didn't really understand all that you were saying until I went back and kind of brought all those things together to this point in Joshua's life. And so he said, there's some powerful things that God can teach us when we're open to it through the life of Joshua. So let's catch up. We're now going to be in chapter 5, where we were in chapter 4, chapter 1 last week, and moving into chapter 6 slightly. And so Joshua has been appointed by God to be strong and courageous. At that point, then God tells him, I want you to send spies into the land. I want you to pick them from one from all of the 12 tribes of Israel. And so they do that. And so they picked out the 12 to send in. And then after that, though, as they're getting ready to go into the land, the people basically affirm that Joshua is their new leader. And ironically, at the end of chapter 1, after God had said, be strong and courageous, what the people then affirming who it was that Joshua was, meaning their next leader, they said to him that they would that as well that as much as they would be obedient to what Moses wanted them to be obedient to, they expressed that they were as loyal to Joshua as they were to Moses. They would be obedient to him in everything that he asked of them. And then they laid this at his doorstep. What we require of you at the very last verse of chapter 1 is that you be strong and courageous. So at the very beginning, Moses said, be strong and courageous. God said, be strong and courageous. And here the people said, we need you to be strong and courageous as we move into this land. They've now gone across the Jordan River. They've taken the warriors from some of the tribes that stayed on the other side of the Jordan, which was their land, while they went in and drove out the inhabitants from the rest of the land that God had promised. So the warriors and the people go across the Jordan. There's some miraculous events that happen there when Joshua tells them that for the priests to step into the Jordan River, when they get ankle deep, they stop, the water upstream stops, and they go by on dry land. The Canaanites that are in the land at this time, they see that and they see this miracle that's happening, and they're dismayed and they're afraid because they know that the Israelites have come, and in their coming, they brought God with them. Interesting is because it's talking here again about the Ark of the Covenant that stepped into the water, cleared the path, and went with them into the promised land. Remember, the ark has been very important in talking about in previous things that I've talked about, especially in the life of Samuel I talked about, because the Ark of the Covenant was always representative of the glory of God, the presence of God, and what we call the Shekinah glory of God, and the presence of God dwelling with his people. Remember that back through this whole year, the one thing that I've emphasized to some extent is the idea that God wants to dwell with his people. God's always wanted to dwell with his people. He wants to dwell with his creation. And so when we reach the incarnation in Christ, it's all about God becoming man to dwell with man, because for some reason he's picked us, as weird and odd as we are at times, to love and to be his people. And he also wants to be with all of creation as well. But there's this profound thought about God wanting to be with his people. And whenever he's with his people, he always demonstrates his power and his glory and his might, or has the opportunity to when we let him. but we might get back to that. If I don't get to it today, I'll probably get to it tomorrow. Anyway, now what's happening is the spies have come back and said the land is everything that we said. And oh, by the way, like they said the last time that the giants were big, they said, God's given us the land. The Canaanites are terrified that we're here. We've got this land. And so they're getting ready to go now into what we're going to pick up. We're getting ready to go into the first battle. They've now come across into the land, the promised land on the other side of the Jordan, and they're right outside of the first city that they're going to attack, which is the famous city that we've all heard about when Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. So Joshua, with the people of God, the army of God, and the presence of God, or now where we're going to pick up the story, is they're on that side, and Joshua is out probably from the camp. He's out away from the people, and he's looking at Jericho, and he's seeing this fortified city with walls on all sides, with great big gates, and are guarded, and knowing that the Israelites and their army are really no match for the walls of Jericho, the strong gates, and the watchmen that are on the wall, and the army that's inside. And so he's spying out the land or looking at assessing the situation for himself. And as this happens, he's going to have a divine encounter. So we're going to pick up in Joshua chapter 5, and we'll pick it up in verse 13. And we're going to then wander over into Joshua chapter 6 a little bit to finish up the story. So this is what it is. Joshua is out, like I said, he's roaming, looking, and wondering and meditating on how he's going to do this. How's God's going to do this? What's the strategy? What's the plan? And he's going to have a divine encounter with the living God. It says, now that it came about that when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him, and his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, rather, I indeed come now as the captain of the hosts of the Lord. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, what has my Lord to say to his servant? So notice the role reverse. The captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. Now the captain of the Lord of hosts is going to give instructions to Joshua. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hands, with its kings and the valiant warriors. You shall march around the city, all the men of war, circling the city once. You shall do it for 6 days. Also, 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, but the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall be that when they make the long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go in, and everyone will go up, every man, and go straight ahead. And then he goes, Joshua then is going to take that action as they move forward. So here's kind of the scene. Joshua, while he's out assessing the situation, runs into this captain of the Lord's host. He sees this being of some kind, big man, or representation of a man, and he's got his sword drawn. And as he's got his sword drawn, Joshua is probably a little bit startled because he's never encountered anything like this. And he realizes that whoever this is that's being presented to him is a man of war. And so he steps forward to the man of war and he says something very interesting. He says, are you for us? Are you against us? Now, maybe Joshua at that time thought if he was against him, that he's going to have to fight him right then. But this particular being says something very odd, but becomes very telling spiritually of a spiritual principle for our life that's very important for us to understand. The being didn't say he was for Israel and didn't say that he was against their adversaries. He said, neither. I'm neither for you and not nor am I for them. But what I am for and what I do represent is that I'm the captain of a realm that you know nothing about because I'm the captain of the Lord of hosts. When he says that, Joshua begins to understand something there. So he basically bows down and said, I'm your servant. When he bows down and he says that I'm a servant, the being then says, get this, because you've heard this before in the Old Testament, take off the shoes from your feet because the ground on which you're standing is holy. Now, you could look at that and say, well, the ground was holy because it was the promised land, but it doesn't smack of that. It smacks more of the reason that that place was holy right then, because this divine being was there. So this divine being is very interesting because this divine being in being there basically commands the exact same thing out of Joshua that he commanded out of Moses when they were taking the people out of Israel. So coming out of Israel, remember, Moses encounters the burning bush. And when he encounters the burning bush, what happens in that instance is he goes up to look upon it and he hears the voice of God saying, take off your sandals or take off your shoes because the very place that you're standing is holy. There's a divine communication. In this case, it's happening between God through maybe a being by Captain Lord of Hosts. Some people would say that that's a theophany, which is basically a manifestation of the Father or God himself. Some would say it was a Christophany, which would be a manifestation of Christ, or others would say it was an angel, such as the archangel Michael. In any case, it was representative of God, if not God in those cases. It would be the same thing with the burning bush. But the burning bush is interesting. The burning bush is interesting because that was a bush that wasn't consumed. That was when the people were in slavery. But after this, now, when they're freed and moving into the promised land, we're finding a manifestation of God that's no longer in the burning bush, but as a captain of the armies of the Lord of hosts or captain of the angels, standing in battle array with his sword drawn. So when Joshua says, are you for us or against us? Basically, this angel is saying, or divine being is saying, I'm not for either. And that's not the question here, Joshua. There's a different question. Now, we're going to get to that in a minute. What's the question? What is it he's really saying? When we talk about this divine being that's here standing with Joshua, that's definitely a holy being sent from God or God himself. We find this being throughout Scripture up to this point. Remember when I said that God always desires to dwell within people? We find this a type or a similar type of this divine being present when Lot had been captured, and going back to Abraham, when his nephew had been captured and been taken into captivity, and he went out to fight the kings to get Lot back. And after that victory, as he's coming back home, he has basically a priest that meets with him that's called by the order of Melchizedek, or a priest that was a high priest. When he meets Abraham coming back from the battle with all of Abraham's spoil, Abraham looks at him, realizes he's a priest of the Most High God, a manifestation of God. And so, out of an act of worship, what Abraham does is he gives him a tenth or a tithe of all the spoils that he took when he was out in battle, representing that there was a being or a presence that was greater than himself. The second time we see this being, so therefore, in this case, this divine manifestation appeared to the people of God or the person of God as a priestly being, someone that mediated between God and man, which would indicate Christ. But there's this mediation that's happening at the priestly level. That's why he gave the sacrifice to the priest. Well, that's the first time. The second time would be when Jacob, later on, after there was this promise that was given to this great nation that was going to come out of Abraham, when Jacob had his brother um, Ishmael, was it Ishmael? Jacob and Ishmael. I think it was Ishmael. It could have been one of the other ones. Jacob and, yeah, I think it was Ishmael. Anyway, yeah, it was. So, see, I'm getting old. So what happened was that there was that he had deceived. Jacob's very name meant deceiver. He'd always deceived really his father and his brother, as far as in just some different dealings, familial dealings within the family. Well, because of that, and because he had stole his brother's birthright, the prophetic birthright that was supposed to be given to Ishmael, Ishmael was seeking to kill him. Oh, what? Esau. Yeah, Esau. Forgive me. It's not Ishmael. That's right. Because uh, Abraham, Isaac, it would be Isaac and Ishmael. That's right. It would be Esau and it would be Jacob. Thank you, Penny. I knew it was. So now I've got it right. Got to go back and change that for tomorrow. See, that's how this works. So Esau is looking to kill him. And so Jacob is, as he's good, he knows he's going to meet. And the long story, he knows that he's going to meet with Esau. He knows Esau wants to kill him, and so what he tries to do is, a day before they meet, is Jacob tries to escape so that he doesn't have to face his brother. Well, before he can escape, and while he's in the middle of his escape, all of a sudden an angel of the Lord comes, and this angel wrestles with Jacob. And it says, the scripture says that they wrestled all night long, and in after wrestling all night long, neither Jacob nor the angel could prevail. They were fighting each other, but Esau was, Jacob was so bent on getting away from his brother that he was going to fight tooth and nail with his angel. Finally, as the day begins to break, the angel says, "Let me go. The day is coming." And he says, "I'm not going to let you go. I'm not going to let you go, no matter what, until you bless me." And the angel touches his hip, and at that time, after that, sequences might be different than that, but at the end of the day, what happened was he then turned around, and this was the blessing before he let him go. The angel of the Lord turned around and he said, "What is your name?" And he said, "My name is Jacob." And he says, "That is right. Your name is Jacob. But from now on, I'm going to change your name, and it will be Israel, because you have striven with God and won." First time we find this theophany is we find this, or this divine presence, is he's a priest for Abraham. The second thing we find is that he's a grappling entity or being. And in this grappling entity or being, that basically he's this entity or being, or this warrior or angel that changes not just your name, but the very character of who you are by his divine presence. The third time we see it, as we just talked about with Moses at the burning bush. At that point with the burning bush, if you remember, the people of Israel were now enslaved years later. They're crying out to God, and God says to Moses, "I have seen the affliction of my people, the marginalization and the enslavement of them, and I've come to set them free. And so you're going to return to Pharaoh and tell them to let my people go." The burning bush experience was God dwelling with his people in their enslavement, in their being living on the margins, in their suffering, in their affliction. He was the God that was with them in their affliction. Now, in the one that we're looking at now in the pericope, talking about Joshua, we see a same manifestation or a similar manifestation of a divine being in the life of Joshua, where he's standing there and basically saying, Joshua not recognizing first when Joshua says, "Are you for us or against us?" And the being says, "I'm neither. I'm captain of the Lord of hosts. That is who I am." But the question is, in asking, "Are you for us or against us?" the being really is saying is, you're asking the wrong question here. The question isn't whether I'm for you or against you. The question, Joshua, is, are you for me or against me? Why is there a difference there? And why did he say it was for neither? Because God's not necessarily interested in the battles of man. God's interested in his own plan and his own sovereignty. And so what happens sometimes is we misconstrue the fact that God intervening in our life and God being a part of our life, that he's for us in every situation. And so what we get the idea of, God is for me, God is for me, he's not against me. And that's true. And there's a level that where that's true. But there's also a level and a spiritual level and a principle basically that is this is that as much as we want God to be for us, and he is for us, there's a part in our covenant relationship with God where we have to be for God. In this case, the question was, it's not a matter of whether or not I'm for you, meaning the angel, because I stand in a covenant relationship with the people of Israel. So, of course, I'm for them. But the question is not that. The question is, Joshua, are you and your warriors for me? Because I've got a battle that, and I've got a contention with the people in the Canaan in this land I want to give you. And my sword is drawn because I'm going to battle on behalf of Israel, but more importantly, because I've got some things to settle with these people that have become corrupt. So I'm moving forward either with or without you. I want your participation in this, and I want to use you. But understand, this is not your battle. This is my battle. And this battle will be fought my way, not your way. And so you've got to be completely attuned to the fact that in this battle, it's not what you want. It's not what you think. It's not how you would want to do it. And what I'm saying is, do not deviate from what I'm going to tell you to do, because if you do, calamity will come upon you and this nation. So listen very carefully. Joshua, you may be the commander of this group of men, but you're not commander of the host. And because of that, I have a higher position and I am your commander. So in this first case, he was a priest. In the second thing, he was the changer of the character of a person. In the third thing, he was the deliverer from those people that were in oppression. And in this fourth, he's the captain of the host of the army, and he's a warrior, and he's moving forward. The reason that Joshua does not can be strong and have good courage is not because of his strength. It's because of the angel's strength. It's not because of what he can do. It's because of what God will do if he trusts in him. One of the most valuable lessons we can learn in our life is to be for God, to be proactive in things for God, that to realize that we're in a covenant relationship with God, that all that God has is ours. And in the same way that all that we have is his. And we spend a lot of time cashing in on God, give me, God, take care of me, God, heal me. And we spend little time saying, God, what can I give to you? How can I give back to you? A breakthrough happens in our life when we begin to recognize that there's a responsibility on us to also, in this covenant relationship, make sure that it's not a one-way street where we're getting things from God and giving nothing back to him, or very little back to him, of being meager in the money that we even give to charities and the church and different things, being generous with other people, be loving people, caring people. There's a responsibility that we have in the covenant as well. And Joshua, as he moves forward, is going to learn this valuable lesson. And so the question for you is, is God for you or against you? That's not the question. The question for you is, are you for God? When you change that perspective and you focus more on God and less on yourself, great things begin to happen. I remember Dick Joyce talking about this before. And he said, for years and years and years, I was praying, God bless my work. God bless my ministry. God bless bless my teaching. And he said, sometimes God just wouldn't bless that. I'd go to God and say, well, why aren't you blessing this? Why aren't you blessing my ministry? And he said, he remembers that the Lord speaking with him one time and pressing upon him. And he says, Dick, he said, did you ever think that the reason I'm not blessing your works is because I'm not interested in your works? Rather than asking me to bless your works, why don't you bring your works to what I'm already blessing, and you'll come underneath the covenant of that blessing? In other words, when we're more concerned about our works, our desires, our actions, our attitudes, being consistent with what God desires of us, he promises prosperity. He promises the future and a hope. He promises to be the mediator between us. He promises to change our name. He promises to be the deliverer and to stand strong with us in the battles that we face in life. But that's something that's a change in perspective. So are you for God or not? Because you can only be for or against. There's no middle ground in this thing. I mean, you can argue that there is, but there's really not. Either you're for God or you're not. In other words, are you looking to God and come underneath his umbrella, or do you want him to move his umbrella to where you are? And that he's not going to do. I'm hoping today you'll say yes to being for God, to thinking more about ways that you can minister to him, you can spend time with him, you can help in the ministry that he wants to do in this world of healing people and reconciling people unto himself. If you can do that, you'll find a great future and a great hope and true prosperity that only God can bring. I think I'm done today. God bless. Have a great day, and I'll see you again next week.